You know, like genuinely what your values are and the future version of you, what your values are. That's going to help you know how to make better decisions.
Welcome to the Council of Dudes podcast. I'm your host, Vinny Brusco. I am a father, a husband, the founder of Agora Social Club, a purple belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, a certified life coach, and a facilitator of the Council of Dudes men's group. This podcast is here to help you tap into and follow your golden thread, that feeling that pulls you forward to become the best version of yourself. If you're someone who's into personal development and self-help and is looking to live a life of more alignment, then this is the podcast for you. Subscribe to the channel, click the notification button, and follow along on the journey of the show.
What's going on? This is Rob Tracz, and you are checking out the Council of Dudes podcast.
And here we go.
So first off, thanks for doing this.
Of course, man.
I appreciate it. We just did your podcast, Surviving the Side Hustle, which is such a perfect name for the journey of entrepreneurship, or you want to call it side hustle, whatever it is. That is the perfect name for it, because sometimes it literally feels like you're just surviving. You're just kind of treading water, trying to not drown, and it's a grind. It's a grind. So we just did your podcast, which is great. I really appreciate you having me on and letting me share a little bit of my journey of Agora and what we're doing here. But thanks for coming on. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, of course, man. And yeah, thank you for coming on to my show too. And the whole point of my podcast, at least, is to kind of connect, collaborate, and share with the world. So I know there's a lot of people, like you said, who are out there just surviving. And a lot of them do it on their own in isolation because, like, I don't know if maybe you, but I know when I first started, I was like, oh, no, you don't understand what I'm doing. Like, I got to do my regular job. I got to do this thing. I got to find time to do that. And then it's like, personal life? I don't think so. I'm just going to keep with this business stuff. And it gets lonely once you start getting into that grind and that hustle for a long time. And I want the podcast to be something for people who are going through that, to one, be able to relate, connect, but then also learn and see that you don't need to sacrifice your well-being to achieve whatever that successful thing that you're trying to chase after.
Yeah, it becomes this, you said it perfectly there with, like, you don't understand, right? And you think that the people that are closest to you are the ones that seemingly would understand, but for some odd reason, that seems to be the exact opposite. And it becomes a journey of your own endeavor, your own path, and then you start to meet the people that get it and are doing their own thing, and you start to find, like, those people around you. But that initial stage, and even like pretty deep into it, it's a pretty lonely path. And I wonder, is that something that intrinsically is part of it, or do you think people could avoid that?
You know, I think, people can definitely avoid that if they know and understand. And I'm sure there are a lot of people out there. There definitely are. They go into entrepreneurship. They connect with people much better. They're a little bit used to it. I think me coming from my background in, like, sports and everything, it was like, only thing I knew was how to grind harder, like push harder, just keep going. You got to endure a little bit more, make the sacrifices, and just keep pushing through. And eventually success will be there on the other side. But I mean, yeah, you can do a lot of great things and, like, cool stuff by yourself. But if you genuinely want to achieve something awesome or make a real lasting impact, you can't do it alone. You got to be able to connect to somebody on another level, like, to be able to sell more products or more services to customers, to connect with people, to grow a team, to elevate what you're doing. That takes that, like, social aspect of it.
Now, outside of the podcast, you also do coaching, right? You do coaching for entrepreneurs to help them get out of their own way somewhat, right? Because as entrepreneurs, we can get busy, but we're not necessarily productive, right? As you start to do more and more, you take on more and more, and all of a sudden, you said it perfectly. You're just giving yourself another job. You're not really free in the sense that you anticipated yourself being free. You're just confined to a new job. So what is that trap about? Like, what is that? Is that just kind of not allocating your time appropriately? Where does that fall under?
Yeah, it's tough to kind of throw it into one bucket because it comes from so many different causes, right? We're all unique. We got different stories, different things going on. So it's going to pop up in different ways. So it depends really on who they are, what they're building, what they're trying to do. But for the most part, it starts to come from that little bit of burnout. And as I continue to develop myself, my coaching, and the coaching itself is actually evolving into strategy development. So I'm actually shifting out of like one-on-one coaching and now building a strategy firm, so bringing on coaches and other people and stuff down the road. And as I continue to develop and look at different systems and ways of doing that, I'm starting to see that a lot of people are experiencing burnout. And one of the major reasons of it is when speed starts to outpace the direction that you're going. And you have this idea, you have this concept, right? You build this skill, you get really good at doing something, you become an expert. Then you realize like, hey, I could make some extra money if I do this on my own. Let me figure out how to start a business. Let me shift this over. And we spend so much time, energy, resources becoming this expert at this thing. And then we're told we can make more money by going into business by ourselves. But nobody tells us how to do that or what we should be doing or looking out for. And we get caught up in this now second job. And sometimes people get caught between the two positions, and then that slows things down. They get frustrated, so they apply more pressure. That speeds things up, and that just exponentially gets them to that burnout spot. And then they're like, what am I doing here? What do I need to do? And you're a fan of Jim Rohn, right? Mm-hmm. I'm pretty sure one of his famous quotes is like, your professional success can't outpace your personal development. So when we get into this business world, we're like, okay, we're doing, but we're losing sight of these different things that we need to be leaning into. We need to be more aware of what our outputs are. We can't just grind as hard as we can. There are going to be times where we need to grind a little bit harder, and we have that end zone in sight where we know, okay, just got to push a little bit longer. I got to make a couple more sales. I can do this. But then having that ability to recover and turn it back down afterwards. We also got to be able to check out what we're consuming, not just nutrition, like dietary, but digital as well. Are we consuming types of content that's educating us and inspiring us, motivating us to keep showing up and pushing forward? Are we learning? Are we figuring out new ways to do things? Or are we just grind, turn the phone on, we're doom scrolling to turn our brain off and just sabotaging ourselves? Because that's limiting what we can excel and get into. And from there, it's like, okay, are we clear on the direction? Do we know where we're at? Do we know where we're actually trying to get to? Or do we start this business because someone put that idea in our head and we are just don't have a second job? I know for me at first it was like, okay, now I start doing this, I'm doing that, I got my supplements, I got online coaching, but I didn't have a reason for it. I was just doing it to just make a little bit of extra money. And I realized from reading this book recently that when you shoot for just 10% better, it's so much harder because there's so many variables and things that you could be doing, should be doing, and it becomes overwhelming. And that's like frustrating because there's so much you can be doing and you're constantly thinking, I need to be doing more. But the concept of the book is like, hey, if you go from 10% better to 10 times better, there's so many less variables for you to choose to actually get there. So then that limits it down, helps you focus, helps you get clear on how to get to that point B. So then you can start making better decisions to get there faster. And then from there, it's like, all right, how do we optimize? How do we actually get there faster? What are our rules and routines that we live our lives by? How do we make sure that those things are doing better for ourselves so that the professional side of things just gets better by association and like default?
Is that Jim Rohn book?
No, actually, that is I think his name is Dan Stevens, maybe, and it's co-authored with this guy, Benjamin something else, I can't remember, but the book itself is called 10X is Easier Than 2X. I think it came out like 2 years ago.
Okay. Yeah, and it makes a lot of sense because you think that there are so many things you could pour yourself into, especially now that social media has become it's a job, right? Like you cannot deny that for social media, they're literally marketing teams. There's great people that are doing things to alleviate that off of your table, right? To take that off of your plate, to move it aside. If you don't have a team around you and you're going to be doing everything, it becomes nearly impossible to get everything done in a day, right? Between emails and just from my experience, you feel like, oh, I have all this time to do it now. And all of a sudden you're like, oh wait, I still have so much more to do. And that becomes daunting because you can get caught in, and I'm very guilty of this. I'm not doing enough. I need to be doing more. But where does the more, like, where do you cap out your more? What's enough, right? Because as you're on this journey of entrepreneurship, whatever that looks like, coaching, business, brick and mortar, there's always going to be more. Like the day can never end. You could just keep on going. So where do you find that cap for yourself?
Yeah, so that's a great question because it's so difficult, right? And I think going back to like, it depends on who you are and what you're doing. And I think shifting the mindset from like, okay, there's a lot of things that I got to be doing, and instead of looking at the difference from where you are compared to everything that you should be doing, and shift it to like, okay, where am I at today compared to what I was doing yesterday? And as long as you're measuring against the wins or the progress that you've been making, then you can kind of keep that focus like, okay, so I've been doing 4 sales calls a week. Like, I don't need to be doing sales calls, emails, all these other things. Let me just prioritize and get to that 5th one, or let me figure out how I can go from 4 to 40. What am I going to need to do that? How do I 10x that? How do I keep moving forward? And then that'll minimize all those different things, and then you focus on like 1 or 2 things that is really going to move the needle forward. And then all of a sudden you don't have those 30 things you got to do, because that all like get pushed to the side, and then the cream of the crop kind of raises to the top, and you just pick the ones that you need to be focusing on. But you can't really decide that unless you have that clarity around like, okay, where am I at currently? What am I actually trying to get to with what I'm doing? And that way you can make those better decisions based off of things like your values, the lifestyle you're trying to build. What do you like? What happens when you achieve that goal? How does that affect your life? And then also like, what are the growth opportunities that you need to pay attention to? Like, what do you need to grow into? Like, what kind of skills do you need to develop in order to get to there?
Yeah, there's a lot there, right? There's a lot of, and you said, I think that's such a great way of putting it, like your personal development can't fall to the wayside because you're focusing on these other things, right? And that goes for any job or parenting or anything of that, anything that consumes a good amount of your time, effort, energy, and resources. You have to have the personal development on top of that, right? It needs to kind of lead the pace of that, because if all of a sudden these other categories, and I'll just take parenting, for example, if all of a sudden parenting becomes a priority, which is so hard to make it not be the priority, but it's almost, the old analogy of like, give yourself the oxygen mask first. That personal development piece, whatever that looks like, health, wellness, reading, meditation, journaling, whatever it is, however it's expressed, is so important to be the lead horse in this journey, because that's what pulls you to learn new things, become a better version of yourself, learn who you want to be. How are these things going to fuel that? And then the other part of it now becomes like the supportive horses.
Yeah. And then the question there is like, all right, we're great. Now there's so much stuff in personal development, and what I got to be paying attention to. So like, what do I pay attention to?
So what do you pay attention to? What are the things that you consume?
So currently right now it's that like systems development, and kind of making sure that not only in my personal life that I'm kind of organized and following a plan, but also for my business too. So I've been systematizing a lot of my conversations and like the way that I approach conversations for like podcast pre-interviews and things like that, like making sure that I'm more intentional with the conversations, making sure that I'm having more conversations because I'm trying to develop better relationships and make myself more valuable to other people. So it's been, okay, how do I do that so I can put it on repeat and continue to go? Because I was mentioning that I'm looking to be hiring more coaches and bringing on other people. If they can do what I'm doing, everybody says like at least 80% of the way there, then they should be replacing what I'm doing. But yeah, if they're even like 50% of doing what I'm doing, then I'm going to be like, hey, I need you to help me doing this, and that. So then I can start to cut down on all those things that I should be doing and just pick the things that I want to be doing that'll move me forward.
Have you read The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield?
No.
I have a copy. I'll give it to you. It is a great read. And one of the things that I've taken away from it, one of the big takeaways were pros hire pros. You have to be able to outsource to do things that you don't want to do and things you don't know how to do. Now, there's a fine line there, because you could take on a new adventure or a new endeavor and get a lot of fulfillment out of trying something new and learning a skill, for sure. But when it comes to certain things, it would be like putting together, like I would bring up the example of putting up my pool. I was like, I'll do it, right? And then all of a sudden I was like, I wasted more time, effort, energy, and money than if I just hired someone to come do it themselves. But there is this, especially when you're in business, there becomes this scarcity mindset, right? Like, I have to do everything because someone's not going to do it the way I do it, or they're not going to have the conversation the way I'm going to have the conversation, or even this fear that kind of is like, am I going to get replaced, right? Is someone going to come in and take over and do all this? Especially if it's not your business, but maybe you're high up in the business. So how do you navigate allocating things to people, but then also staying grounded in and firm in who you are and what you bring to the table?
I think, well, so one, just more self-awareness, understanding yourself, your own values, like what are your strengths, what can you lean into, like what is it that makes you better, and then what things that you can't, like what can you actually delegate out to. So like for example, like I'm terrible with like the creativity and making things look good, especially for like graphics and such like that. So for me, it was always hiring like a VA to make something look nice. Now, thanks to like ChatGPT, it's super easy. I just say, hey, I want something that looks like something like this, and then they just pump it out. Slides and everything, it's super quick. But like something like that even does still take some time. So like every week on my mastermind, I've got a new slide deck with different things. I have templates and stuff, but I still am creating that. So, and for me, I leverage like ChatGPT and AI to still create those slides, but I still have to go in and prompt it and what the theme of the conversation for the week is based off of something else. So I can't like preload it out super far, but what I can do is I can hand it over to somebody else, being like, hey, put this into chat, make sure that it does this and that, make sure it's ready to roll.
Yeah, AI is such a great tool in a lot of ways, and obviously there's a whole fear mongering that you can also allocate your entire energy towards. It's important to realize how you can use any of these things as a tool, right? Social media, they are all tools, but I think something that you mentioned there was knowing your strengths and weaknesses, right? That's kind of like an underlying theme, I think, with a lot of people. And having opportunities to reflect on your own blind spots, right? And that's tough because no one wants to be weak. No one wants to be perceived as weak. No one wants to say, oh, this is where I suck at something, right? Especially when you're in the entrepreneurial space business. There's an ego attached to that, right? Showing up in a certain way, I got this all down. But when you're able to see your blind spots, and more importantly, you have people to point out your blind spots, that's where real growth tends to happen.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's crazy because like I remember when I'm first starting to build things and I'm like, okay, I got this performance coaching, I can help these people. I'd go to all these networking events, and then of course, every time you go to a networking event, everybody's doing exceptionally well. Everybody's thriving. Right. They're like, their business is booming, blah, blah, blah. Like they have no time for anything. And I'm like, dude, then what are you doing here at this event? Shouldn't you be like doing something that you say you're doing? And like,
that's a really good point.
Because nobody wants to admit that, yeah, they're struggling with something somewhere along the lines, and because it sucks. And like you said, that's why it's so important to have coaches and mentors. Like I've got a speaking coach, I got a personal brand strategist. I have good friends that won't bullshit me. They'll just tell me straight up, like, hey, dude, you got to do better on this, you got to do better on that. And I think that's crucial for anybody who's serious about kind of growing and doing things. And in that early stage entrepreneurship, when you're that solopreneur and you're like making that shift into it, there is that ego that you kind of have to overcome. And eventually you're going to have to, if you're one of those lone wolf people, like you're only going to get so far. And it reminds me of this one guy that I used to be really close with, and he like developed this business, and he was like, it was this laser engraving thing. And he was like, he had way too many orders and he couldn't answer the emails fast enough because he just couldn't do it. And I was like, dude, why don't you just hire like your sister or somebody else to do that for you? He was like, no. Nobody can answer an email like I can. I was like, bro, what are you talking about, dude? All they got to do is say yes.
Chatbot that can answer better.
Here's the invoice, and that's all you got to do.
Right. What do you think that's tied to? Is that just ego? Is that just control freak type of mentality? Yeah,
I think so. And then I think there's a lot of other demons and stuff that people got to like battle with themselves, and like it's you can't overcome it if you don't do that internal reflection stuff, and if you don't know what you don't know. So like if you don't have a coach or somebody to show you the perspective or looking at it through a different lens, it just slows down that whole process, which is also not bad too. Like going through the journey at your own speed and learning the lessons yourself is okay. Like I'm totally fine with just kind of piecing things together, making one hire at a time, just kind of growing, building things. And I enjoy kind of going through the whole process. Like somebody was talking to me the other day, and they were in a situation where they could have helped somebody, but it put them in a weird spot. And I was talking to them, like kind of weighing the pros and cons. And then afterwards I was just kind of like, well, I mean, isn't part of the human experience like experiencing the peaks and the valleys? Like maybe this is something that he just needs to learn on his own. So maybe you're not in the right spot to save him from that. So maybe you should let him kind of like trip a little bit so he can pick himself back up.
Yeah, the human experience is a rough one.
Yeah.
Because you do need to, I mean, listen, as being a dad, and I can only say this from that lens, you want to protect yourself and those around you from falling and whatever that looks like, right? However that's expressed. But there is something to just, about kind of learning it the hard way in a sense, right? The difficulty, and then sitting with that and those scraped knees and learning the lesson in an uncomfortable way.
Yeah.
And that's just as valuable as, in the midst of growing Agora and doing all this 2.0 stuff, the discomfort level is extreme. Like it's a very discomfort, uncomfortable place to be in a lot of ways, right? But I have to constantly remind myself that this is just as much a part of framing the pictures and painting the walls and signing up people and having fun, right? This is just as much a part of that. And that could be a physical endeavor. Like I do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So, and you come from a sports background, that grunt work, which we kind of talked about a little bit earlier, is a part of it. But that only goes so far. But then there also comes to like a concession point where like, oh, this is just kind of part of it. Like I can't avoid this. No matter how many people I hire, how many resources I have, I can maybe shorten the span of it. But this is just as much a part of it as anything else.
Hi everyone, I'm Vinny Brusco, founder and CEO of Agora Social Club. I'm also all of these things. Agora Social Club is Westchester County's hub for guys' mental fitness. Let me show you how we're revolutionizing the future of men's mental health. All accessible via key fob as a member, Agora Social Club seamlessly blends the community, comfortability, and convenience of a coffee shop, community workspace, gym, and recovery center. Since opening in April of 2024, Agora Social Club has helped hundreds of guys become better men. Through our men's groups, dads groups, community ruck walks, and 5Ks, guys are finding a deeper sense of connection through community. But don't just take my word for it. Check out our 5-star Google reviews where guys are sharing their transformative experiences. So what's next? We're looking for an investor to help us build Agora 2.0, a flagship location located right here in Larchmont, offering our members even more space, more amenities, and more community. By the end of 2030, we're targeting multiple locations in 4 major U.S. cities. We're excited to share our vision of the future of men's mental fitness.
Yeah, and I love that too. And like when I first started speaking, it was like very obviously nerve-wracking, and like I still get nervous, which I'm grateful for. But I remember like talking to somebody, and I was like, "Geez, man, one day it's just, what am I gonna do when I'm like going out and I'm just not gonna feel nervous? It's like, do I just like do something else?" And they were like, "No, dude, you're always gonna be nervous, but like you're gonna be more comfortable with it." And then that's where other things kind of evolve and get into it. So like enjoy these emotions and these sensations now, like the sweaty palms and like the nervousness, and like as long as you know you and you know what you're trying to do, like, and you keep in mind that what you're trying to talk about and what you're trying to share has a point. Like you're trying to help somebody else. You're not just trying to just talk to get attention. You're trying, as long as you're trying to help somebody and there's a real reason behind the stories and the messages that you're putting out there, it'll just make it a lot easier, more enjoyable. And then you can sit into the different sensations and feelings that you're going through.
Yeah. I was in radio for a while, and every time I would hit that on-air button to turn on the microphone right before, like, you'd have the song and it would fade down and then you'd have to speak and you had 30 seconds. Every time you have a counter, and every time I see that clock going down, I'd be like this. I couldn't get the words to come up. And then as soon as I hit on and pot it up, like that. But I had to feel that. Like it was so uncomfortable. I was like, oh my God, I'm going to hit mic on, like the song's going to end and I'm not going to be able to speak. And I had like scripts and there were certain things I had to say and certain promotions I had to talk about. But I was doing it for years. And college radio, it was always been a part of my DNA. But sure enough, man, that mic would, that clock would go down. I'd be like, 102.3 WP, like it'd come right out. So it's important to lean into that discomfort a little bit. And, my daughter does acting and she gets nervous about something, or she'll be like, oh, I'm a little, I'm like, that's like the nervousness, the anxiety, the fear, all that discomfort is super valid. And there's also an opportunity to alchemize that and say, like, I really care about this thing. Like, I want this to go well, or use it as encouragement and not just lean into like, oh, this sucks. It's uncomfortable. I'm getting butterflies in my stomach.
Yeah. And, that's a good thing, too, is like paying attention, right? So, like, we have opportunities to kind of learn more about ourselves and sitting into it like, okay, I am nervous, but why am I nervous? What is kind of leading towards this? Am I nervous about what other people are going to think or say, or am I nervous about something else? And then you're using that as an experience so you can learn from it and grow through it, right? Like, getting outside of your comfort zone is where the growth happens. But if you don't learn and like that comfort zone never like expands, you're going to still stay in the same spot. And you got to be open to the reflection. You got to be open to what's happening, how your body's reacting to different things, and take that in so you can do better next time.
What do you do to make yourself uncomfortable?
So it kind of depends on different situations and such. And the last thing that I did, because I was sitting back and I was like kind of journaling a little bit, and I was like, you know what, things are going pretty well. I got a bunch of new clients. I got some things going on here. Life is good, like blah, 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 blah. And I was like, you know what, because I always do cold blasts after my shower. And then I was like, you know what, I got to add some discomfort in here. I'm just going to get in cold every day. So it's like ice coming out, and I just get in, I'm like, ugh, and then I let it kind of warm up. So it's like silly things like that, or like, I'll take the stairs again. So, I'm up on like the 13th floor in my building, and gym's down on the 5th. So I've been just hopping in the elevator and such. And then just recently I'm like, you know what? No, I got to kind of step it up a little bit more. Let me take that extra 8 flights of stairs or whatever and just go back up. It takes an extra few minutes or whatever. But like, yeah, it's hard. I haven't done much cardio work in a while, but let me just hop on these stairs and just get up there and just carry on my day after that. So it's like small things.
Yeah, but then that becomes like, how long will that last? Because I'll go through those like seasons of life or whatever you want to call them. And then it's like, all right. And then there's like I feel like that raises your new foundation, right? Like you'll hit these stretches of discomfort, cold. Like I did the cold plunge sauna in the morning, run a 5K every morning, did jiu-jitsu, and then some of those things fell by the wayside. I see a lot of value in those things. I would still love to incorporate them into my life, but in the season of my current life, it's just not applicable, right? It's just like, all right, so what are the things I want to strip away, and what I want to keep? And for me, it's like jiu-jitsu. Okay, great. So how long will that last? And then how do you manage that kind of change of season, being like, all right, we're going to strip away some of the stairs and we're going to go back to the elevator, or we're going to go back to switching back to cold at the end?
Yeah, I think it's just kind of looking bigger picture and then breaking it into those seasons, and then like agreeing on like, okay, I'm going to do this for a little while. I'm going to do it for however long it is. And then like having a reason for doing all those things too. So for myself, it's like, okay, the past couple of months have been kind of chill, relaxed, coming off the holidays. Like things were good. Recurring income with clients and projects and things like that were fine. I hosted an in-person event last month, but so that's been a while since I've done one myself. But that didn't really stress me as much as it had used to. So I was sitting down, I'm like, all right, what do I need to do to kind of get to that next level? And it was like, okay, systematizing a lot of these things and now implementing that. So I'm like, all right, one of my goals is now I got to be having more conversations with people, and I started to be doing that. And now I'm like, okay, well, now I got to start being more intentional with that. So now I'm asking for introductions, making offers more frequently, really kind of pushing myself and getting out of that comfort zone, because it was like, okay, I'm struggling a little bit to talk about what it is I'm trying to grow. So then like, why don't I just take away that and just start asking people and start telling people, and like unapologetically, and just kind of going through that, asking people for some time, 5-10 minutes, just to kind of go over something, but getting into more of those conversations. I feel like, for example, on social media, it's easy to just go into the DM. Somebody might be interested or whatever. You're checking in, how's somebody doing? But nobody answers the phone anymore. So I'm like, all right, well, that's uncomfortable. So why don't I just start getting on the phone, getting on Zoom, seeing people, kind of pushing that a little bit, get myself more comfortable with that. So that's like the current challenge that I'm going through, between like obviously the stairs and stuff, but like let me start having more conversations because it's uncomfortable.
Where did you get your sales background from?
A lot of different ways, I think. I think from my background as a strength and conditioning coach, the first facility that I interned, I basically took over as like manager, and I was like running the thing. So I was doing all the stuff, sales and stuff like that, but I didn't really care. So there wasn't too much like pressure on me. It was already like a self-running facility. And so that gave me a little bit of confidence in trying to test things out. But once I moved into like personal training with a commercial gym, they had like a sales process. And that never really stuck with me. And then as I've been kind of growing, the one place that I was at, they were kind of like backwards with it. And like reflecting on it now, it was probably good, but
sure,
now that I've gone through, I've worked with organizations like Brand Builders Group and Art of Coaching, understanding like communication styles and like having a system to it. So now when I go through a sales like call or process, it's more of just like genuinely, it ends up being the same thing as just like checking in with your friends. Like, hey man, what are you working on? What are you doing? Oh, what's the issue? What are you struggling with? What's taking so long for that? Blah, 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 blah. And then for me now, it's not like I don't have to handle objections as much, but it's me identifying if something that I can do would be a solution to something that somebody else is struggling with. And the better and faster that I can kind of pay attention and recognize that, then it's like, okay, I should make an offer for that. Because forever, it was always just like blah, 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 blah. And then I try to jump into like coaching immediately. Like, oh, dude, I read this book about this. This is what you need to do. Like, you should consider that. But now it's like, okay, this person's struggling with something. I think I could be able to help them with that. And now it's like, well, why don't I offer it to them first and just being like, hey, man, if you'd love to hear more about this, like this is the stuff that I work with my team and my clients and things like that. Like we can sit down. I got a pretty easy framework for that. Like it can help you turn around really quick. But if you're interested, let's have another conversation about that and separating that out.
Yeah, sales is really one of the ultimate tests of a person, man.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's same thing because everybody's different, so they should have their own little unique approach to it.
Of course,
but
absolutely.
Like again, then going back to the same thing with like speaking on stage. Like if I'm worried about me, like, oh, I got to make this sale, then it's going to be higher pressure. It's going to be higher stakes at it. But if I go at it like, hey, I'm just genuinely interested in what you're going on, and then it's like, oh, there is something there I might be able to help you with, to position that, and then being okay if they say no. Like it's not life or death. Like cool, and then just carry on. Still a good, positive, like friendship, relationship. It doesn't have to be like sale lost, like, oh, that was a missed opportunity, ruined. But like, you just learn to grow and just kind of roll with the punches.
Yeah, I think genuine interest is really, but people can sense that, right? There's an authenticity piece that when you're like kind of faking it or you're just overstretching that authenticity, people are like that bullshit radar is real. And really, I mean, and you can learn some of the skills like active listening and all that stuff, echoing back to what people say and all that. But there's really, you can remove all of that, but really genuinely being interested and then really just being present with someone, right? And really listening to what they're saying. And I think it goes to what you're saying as well, like this non-pressure thing. Like when you make it about like, it's gotta work, right? Yeah. And that's anything. It seemingly becomes that much harder to do. And then for some reason, that really doesn't seem to work out. Where it's more flow-based and it's more like casual, that seems to always kind of have the result that you're really aiming for.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like the traditional sales where it's like, it's like you versus them, like go out, like, you don't hang up until they,
a few people.
Yeah, don't hang up until they say yes. Like, don't take no for an answer. Like that kind of thing. That just puts so much pressure on you, and then whoever you're dealing with doesn't want to be sold. So it's like that's even more weird. Like I was speaking with this one organization, and I was really interested in working with them, and they were like helping new and upcoming speakers, like developing a speaking career and making it into like an actual thing. And I was really interested. But I had just finished another coaching program, so I was like, no, I'm not quite ready to kind of invest in this. And he's like, oh, well, we can do different payment plans, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, dude, no, I'm not right now. Like, I want to still kind of like blah, 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 blah. And he just wouldn't let me go. And I was like, bro, I was like, I really want to do this, and I really like this organization and everything else, but you are turning me off so bad that I'm not going to be working for you, and I'm not hiring you, and I'm going to tell everybody else not to work with you too, just because you ruined this for me. Yeah. Like, you just wouldn't be human about it. Like, I don't know where you're coming from, but like, chill, dude. So it ruined it for me.
I get that because there are so many. You get on these calls with these organizations, and whether it be marketing or whatever it is. And I think one of my favorite ones is like, when they make it about the financial aspect of it. And listen, you can't pretend like finance is not a part of someone's life, right? I was in the car business for 16 years and be like, oh, no, it's all like, okay, if you give it to them for $1, okay, maybe, right? We can reel it back to that point. But when you're in a certain like window, right? It's a real thing. Or the old like, oh, if they have to talk to their wives, like that's a real conversation. Like again, removing the human element from it and being like, all right, dude, like, yeah, go talk to your wife. Let me know how that goes. Like, can you overcome some objections? Sure, absolutely. But there would be trainings of like, well, if your wife, in boiler room, right? If your wife, does your wife call you when she's at the store to pick out the box of cereal, right? Yeah. It's like, I'm not going to fucking insult someone. I'd be like, go fuck yourself.
Whoa. Doesn't your wife love you?
Right,
Doesn't she want you to do better?
Right.
Like, so you're saying she wouldn't want you to do this.
Right. Exactly. Well, if you really cared about your future, you'd invest the money now. Or you're like, huh? Yeah. Like, do I not care about my future?
Yeah.
Right. But there is a fine line in sales, and there's something to it, right? There's when you do it for a long time, and you become a master at it, 16 years, when you entrench yourself in it for so long, there's a feeling to it, right? There's a feeling to a sale, and you can feel when you're onto something and what threads you need to pull versus just yanking shit and just seeing what kind of comes out of it. Yeah. And you may make the sale, but you really lose like the essence of it, and you lose really like referrals and future business, and that turns people off.
Yeah, and like keeping that growth mindset still to today and going forward. And I remember, I probably shared the story with you too, but like I remember my first day, or it was the last day of undergrad. So like all my friends from my house had just gone home, and I was the last one packing up, cleaning up the house. Got my car all ready to roll. I hop in the car and I'm driving out of town, and I just take a deep breath in and I go, wow. I have a bachelor's in kinesiology. I know everything there is to know about human movement. I'm at the top of the world. I'm not going to learn another thing about anything in this world. I can't believe this is it. I know everything there is. And then like 2 weeks later, my internship, I was like, shit, I don't know anything about anything.
Yeah. That's jiu-jitsu every day for me. I go there, and one day I'm like, I kind of know jiu-jitsu, and then I leave, I'm like, I don't know anything. Yeah. Just at the red light, just like, fuck, why do I do this? Why do I do this every day? But when did your personal development journey start? Like, what did it start with? Was it just your own introspection, or?
No, I think so. Like, I think it really started back probably like grade school, super young. So,
oh wow,
my first introduction to kind of personal development and just like human performance was like, I think I've shared with you too this story about I got tricked into kind of going to football practice. One of my first real friends, after moving around a lot of different school districts and stuff in like 3rd or 4th grade, my friend's dad convinced me to go to football practice. And I learned 2 very important lessons that first day of football practice. First was, you can't wear jeans to football practice. So I was like, all right, great. Now I'm this kid wearing jeans, and this is
the Little Giants, right?
I was like, great, what the hell? And then the second thing I had noticed and learned was like, okay, so a lot of these other kids who are more popular, they know everybody, they seem to get through these warm-ups, and like they can do everything pretty easy, and I'm over here struggling to do the warm-up lap. And for such a young age, that kind of clicked in my head, like, okay, well, if I push myself a little bit harder, like I can't barely do these warm-up jumping jacks and push-ups, but I can do these at home and I can get better at them. And I learned to kind of do a little bit of that. And then I realized, like, okay, the more that I kind of do this stuff on my own here, I'm starting to play a little bit more. More people are like talking to me. I'm seeing success for what I was chasing after, which was like friends and like all this other stuff. And that kind of began the journey of like, okay, if I train, I get to get a little bit stronger, and then the stronger I get, then this moves into that, and then I started reading like workout magazines, which like Men's Health back in the day was like, oh, if you eat 5 blueberries first thing in the morning, your hair will be better or something like that.
Right.
So then I started like reading all those magazines, and my friends used to like tease me, and they're like, oh, here's Rob with a useless fact about nothing. And
about walnuts.
Yeah, and I loved it, and it was interesting because I was like, oh, I could do that a little bit better and better, and it was funny because eventually I ended up being on the Men's Health Fitness Council. So I was like writing little articles and stuff in the magazines, and it was always part of what I wanted to do. And that's what made it made it like an eye-opening experience when I was shifting from strength and conditioning into this, what I'm calling personal performance strategy. It's like, okay, this is like what I want to be doing, helping people like optimize and become better versions of themselves through this like awareness-based process that I kind of created. And just over the years, it's always been like kind of something there eating away at me, and it was always like, all right, how do I do this better? What am I doing for that? And it was that little bit of self-awareness and reflection I kept coming back to.
Yeah. Physicals always seems to be the common on-ramp for a lot of people into learning about themselves. It's like the low-hanging fruit, so to speak, right? Like you enter some form of, I want to be better physically, whether it be aesthetically or just you want to be able to, take your Christmas tree down, in December. you have these moments you're like, I need to be better at this, life, living, breathing, moving. And all of a sudden, I feel like that's like the floodgates open after that. And now all of a sudden, personal development, whether it be spirituality, religion, just, learning, consuming, for some people, it just becomes like you can't get enough of it, right? It's just this endless quench, this thirst that needs to quench with learning and growing more.
Yeah, well, I mean, so just taking the gym, for example, like you start going to the gym, you're learning all these new principles and skill sets and things to kind of be aware of, right? So it's not only like, okay, the exercises themselves, so like how am I moving myself, but you're also learning like how to plan and prioritize, because you've got a schedule. So like, when am I going to go to the gym next? How am I going to fit this in? So now you're forward thinking about the future. You're considering other things. You're developing goals. Like, okay, well, why am I going to do this exercise versus another exercise? Because now it's like, oh, I want to get stronger for this one particular thing. So then now that's starting to come through. Now you're also thinking like your inputs too. So like, oh, okay, if I eat like crap, I'm going to perform like crap in the gym. So why don't I start paying more attention to what I'm putting in? And it's like, okay, well, how do I do better with this? It's like, oh, how do I stay more accountable? How do I connect with somebody to come to the gym with me? Like, you learn all these different lessons just from that one thing. And like, it's the easiest because you can start that journey. It's one of the easiest, I should say, because you can start that journey anywhere, right? You can start to exercise a little bit at home, and you can start to be aware of those different principles and things you got to start to bring into your life.
Yeah, you become like this, your own ecosystem, right?
Yeah.
You want to eat better because you want to perform better. You want to perform better. You want to eat better. You want to feel, it becomes this ecosystem of yourself to become better, right?
Yeah.
And you talk about 3 principles, which is look good, feel good, do great things, right?
Yeah,
Which is kind of three frameworks. Why start with look good?
So the look good, that's the first phase area. And so for the prime performance process, there's 6 prime principles that you got to follow. Each phase has 2 of the principles. That first one of looking good is really all about building that resilience, grit, and confidence that comes through. Because in entrepreneurship, you got to be able to handle the ups and downs. You got to be resilient. You got to stick through, and you got to be able to endure, but you got to be able to know when to endure. So really all of that's about like checking in on your outputs. How are you challenging yourself? Are you challenging yourself appropriately? That sets the stage and the foundation for growth. And the second half, or the other side of the coin for looking good, is showing up with energy, motivation, inspiration, being ready to roll. So this is where that like dietary nutrition comes into play. So making sure that you're fueling yourself correctly. There are going to be times when like it's an off season, like the holidays, where you want to be able to enjoy yourself, because nobody likes going to a birthday party and not being able to like have a slice of pizza or whatever. Like, right. You don't want to be that guy.
I'm always like, oh, for your birthday, I'll have this slice of cake. Just wishing you well.
Yeah. Yeah. So you want to enjoy yourself with stuff, and but then like that's important because you want to make sure that you're showing up for the different seasons. So like, when last year there was a season where I had a lot of events. I had almost like 4 events a week, teaching multiple times, and it was just 6 weeks of just like chaos of also doing a lot of coaching and all these events and being on 24/7. So I needed to make sure that I was fueling myself well. So I was eating super clean, having things kind of pre-planned out for myself, and just kind of making sure that I'd show up well. But then like other seasons, like know when to turn it off. Like it's kind of like in strength and conditioning, it's like, okay, when am I going into a bulk season? I don't want to be going into a bulk season right before vacation time. Like I want to be cutting and I want to be going. So you want to be able to move that. But in addition to the dietary nutrition, it's the digital nutrition too. So like, how am I staying like motivated? Am I just turning on my phone and turning my brain off, like I was saying earlier, to end the day? Or am I actually like listening to a podcast like this where I'm getting inspired and connecting with people? Or am I listening to an audiobook and like learning and rethinking and moving forward? Or am I just having terrible like conversations? Like, am I surrounding myself with friends and having conversations that are inspiring me and moving me forward? Or are we just talking about the good old days in high school? Like every weekend, same conversations, bringing up the same stories.
Yeah. That's so huge. I talk about that a lot, is the idea of like, the energy, right, that's surrounding you, right? And it does take on different ways, shapes, and forms, right? Whether it be what movies you're watching, shows you're watching, music you're listening to, content you're consuming. It all plants these seeds of positivity, negativity, right? Either it's pushing you forward in growth and mindset, or it's kind of sucking the energy out of you. And you don't realize that because it just, you consume different things throughout different phases of your life. And all of a sudden you start to feel differently once you start consuming different things. And in the personal development space, there's so many things out there, right? It's hard to actually find what you like, narrow down, stay locked in without having all these other distractions.
Yeah, and knowing when it is time to kind of shift and change to the next thing.
Yeah. Do you think that happens like organically, or do you think it's something you should be mindful of?
I definitely think it's something you should be mindful of and just paying more attention to different things. But if you're just kind of willy-nilly going through life,
because the old expression is what the teacher appears when the student is ready. So there's so many times where I'll start or I won't consume something. I'll be kind of in a season of like, all right, like, because again, personal development, self-help, you feel like I can read all the books, but when are you actually going to take action on it, right? Because you can read and listen to Napoleon Hill till you're blue in the face, but if you don't do anything with it, it's kind of useless. Yeah.
Well, so I use the analogy of because I drive a Jeep Wrangler, so I use an analogy of driving a vehicle. So a perfect example was girlfriend Victoria and I, we were planning a trip for her birthday a few years ago, and we landed on wanting to go to Montreal. And neither of us had ever been there, and we were like, oh, this would be great. Her birthday's in March. So we talked about it, birthday came and it went, and then we like kind of talked about it and didn't talk about it and continued to not talk about it. And then by like August and September, it was like, oh, never got around to doing that. So then I was like, all right, let me just sit down. We'll plan this. Let's do a road trip up there. We can hop in the car, we can enjoy it, and we can go through. And like on the road trip, you got snacks and things like that, and eating and doing well and really fueling the ride to go all the way up there. But then when we were getting closer to Canada, there was a huge thunderstorm. And so the thunderstorm was great at first because it was washing a lot of that dirt and like bugs off of my windshield. But then it got so bad that like I had to slow down. And then like we were on the highway going like 30 miles an hour with the flashers on, wipers going full speed, but still can't see. So you're at a snail's pace now. And I think that's a perfect analogy too for like what we're doing. So when you're going on a trip, whatever you're trying to go from point A to point B, you got to make sure that you're fueling yourself well. You got to know the journey first. You got to plan it out, because unless you plan it, it's never going to happen, right? Like all those months that went by without us ever actually planning the trip to Montreal. You get the plan done, then you want to fuel up. So making sure that you've got good things, you got snacks, you got ready to roll for the trip itself. Like if I showed up with like a pot full of chili, that's not going to help us in the car, because it's not going to you're not going to be able to eat that. Right. But so you want to fuel well for the journey that you're on, but then also the environment's important too. So the types of content and things that you're consuming. So if you're in a situation where you're binging and you're just wasting time doom scrolling, that's like a lot of dirt and bugs and clouding up your windshield. Yeah, you can wash it away by listening to like a good podcast or like a motivating song or YouTube clip, but that washes away and then the bugs and dirt come right back on. And same as like with the thunderstorm, if you just consume so much positive stuff where you're just overloaded, you're going to slow down that process to get to that point B, because you're overloaded and you're not actually taking action. And that was me for a while. It's like coaching programs, no music, only audiobooks, only this. And I was consuming a lot, learning a lot, but I never gave myself room to like actually implement and take action and build something. Yeah. So it slowed me down, and I wasted like probably 8 months of time where I could have been building and growing and thinking about like, oh, where could I be now if I had just planned that instead of just sat there and consuming.
Yeah, but implementation has to come from like integration, right? Like you could listen to, but like it has to sit in you for a little while, right? So as much as we could all look back and go, oh, I wasted all this time doing this thing that I could have been doing this other thing and building towards that thing. There is this process of integration, and really not just like filling out the bubble test, but really understanding it and knowing it and being able to express it in a way that's, again, going back to kind of sales, that's authentically you. Mm-hmm. Because if you're just consuming it and then just, all right, I'm going to go take action on this without a true integration, that's where the authenticity piece falls by the wayside.
Yeah, but I mean, at least you're like going out and trying to take action. Even if it's not aligned, then you're learning a little bit. Sure. But like where I was in that situation, like I had this app on my phone that just gave me like the Spark Notes version of the book. So I would just rip through like a book, get like the key takeaways, and I would just move on to the next one and just move on to the next one. So like in 1 week, I would have like consumed like 50 books worth of content, but then I don't remember any of it or who wrote what. And I was just like, oh yeah, I think I know something about something, but I don't really know anything again. I'm like, damn, I feel like I'm always not learning anything.
Yeah, that's a good feeling sometimes. The next part of that is feel good, which I think kind of pickles or piggybacks right off of look good, right?
Yeah. Because once you're looking good, now you know where you're going. You kind of got this. You're feeling good because you got this foundation of strength and confidence. Then you're energized and ready to roll, and you're motivated to get there. Then feeling good is like, okay, now we got to know where we're currently at and what it is, where we're going. We got to get clear on that actual journey. So previous step, we were ideating like, okay, we know we got to be putting in some work. We know what we got to do. Now it's like, okay, what does that really look like? What does the journey, the path really look like, and why? And what is that future version of ourselves? We got to get clear. So the first part of feeling good is the principle about clarity, making sure that we're crystal clear on what we're doing. Then when you're clear on that journey, it's like, how do we speed up that process? How do we optimize that? So feeling good is really about knowing the journey and getting there smoothly, like a nice smooth ride, right? Because what feels nicer than going out for a nice sunny day cruise with the roof off, right?
Right.
Or do you want to be bumping around with the rain pouring all over you and everything?
Right.
So that's the feeling good area.
So because obviously any journey or any goal that you go towards, there's going to be adjustments that you're going to have to make, and you're going to have to pivot. You're going to have to, not take things personally, and you're going to have to keep on moving. So how do you, because that doesn't feel good, right? And there's a realistic expectation there that, it's not going to just be smooth sailing the whole ride, right? There's going to be things that come up. So how do you teach or how do you implement adjustments?
In that clarity principle, when we cover that, because that's really about making better decisions on how to get to that point B. And you make better decisions by going back to like what I hinted at earlier is understanding, well, I use an acronym FLAG, F-L-A-G, really understanding what your foundational values are. So when you know like genuinely what your values are and the future version of you, what your values are, that's going to help you know how to make better decisions. So like right now, a lot of my values are around business and growing and connecting. And I know in the future, I want to be a dad. So I know family is going to have to be a higher value. So like I got to start prioritizing that now. So when it comes down to like, okay, do I take on an additional like training session or a training call or a coaching thing or whatnot? Or is that my boundaries for time with Victoria? In the past, I would just be like, oh, sorry, where I'm dating, I have somebody who wants to do a fitness session right now, so we can't do date night.
Right.
But now, because I'm stepping into that, I'm like, okay, these are some times where I'm prioritizing for that. And now I have these boundaries, whereas before the decision would be like straight to that. But now that I'm thinking forward about future me, now it's easier for me to make that decision of like, no, like I don't care about that extra $150 from that training session. I'm just going to stick with going and wasting $400 on dinner with Victoria. So it's like you're okay with those decisions because you're aligned with that future version of yourself.
Yeah. Have you listened to Rob Dyrdek talk about like his life?
I have he's pretty like
systematized.
Yeah, very.
I mean, like he literally will break down the hours of the day that he spends in X, Y, and Z. And like over the course of a week, a month, a year, it will be like as balanced as it can be, right? Mm-hmm. Based off of like percentages of actual numbers and hours that he spent there, which I think is such an interesting way. I mean, something I do not step into that space, right? I'm not a very systematized, I think of the future, but I'm like, all right, between here and there, I'll figure it out, right?
You mean your calendar's not color coded?
No, see, I need that. I don't even have a calendar, dude. It's like, oh, let's book a podcast. I'm like, all right, we'll figure it out. Like, I think, adding, but then you also have to like lean into who you are, right? Like me doing that I would be freaking the fuck out. Yeah. I'd be freaking out with something like that.
Well, it's all like on a continuum, right? So like I didn't start off with like knowing what I was going to do, what colors were going to mean what, but it was like, okay, now I've started to pay attention, especially when I started shifting out of like fitness. And I was like realizing like, oh, okay, like I'm trying to move into doing this other thing, but I'm held back by doing all this other stuff for like fitness and then also the travel too. So I started like tracking my travel time. So like travel then had a color. So it was like, so then I could like accurately track like how much time am I really spending on traveling. So like two to 3 years ago, I was still spending like 30 plus hours in fitness training. And that was slowing me down because that's a full-time job where you can't dedicate to building something else that you're trying to. So instead I was constantly talking about doing something, but never actually putting any action into it. So once I started being aware of that, it was like, okay, well this week I had 31 sessions. Let me try to get under 25 for the next month. And then I would try to chip away. And me seeing that I was spending 40 hours a week in my car, just driving to people's houses, I was like, wait, 40 hours in the car plus 40 hours of training session plus trying to spend time with Victoria plus trying to spend time with my speaking career. I'm like, I don't have enough hours anymore. So then you start to realize like, okay, this is where I'm trying to move to. Let me pay more attention. Let me cut back on these things that I no longer or I've outgrown. Or if I can't delegate or hire a coach to do the fitness stuff, like that's time for me to then step away from that.
What comes up for me is all well and good. How do you coach parents? Because that's a whole other ball of wax that is an X factor for better and for worse, right? Sick kids, right? There are so many curveballs that get thrown at you as a parent that it's almost inconceivable to not expect something to come your way. So how do you manage with people who have kids or who have a different lifestyle than you do? Because it's easy to say like, oh yeah, I just color code my life, and I'm like, I'm sitting here going like, dude, like I was kicking and screaming to get, not today actually, today was a good start to the morning, but there are days it's just like I'm lucky like to get them out of the house.
Yeah, so obviously I can't relate because I don't have any, any kids that I know of. So like,
right.
But I mean, it's like still, it's like okay, so scaling it down, maybe it's not like color coding, but it's like okay, well, paying attention to the rest of the day, like maybe your blocks for availability that you can control or be more aware of is a little bit. It depends on the situation.
Yeah.
So like if you're trying to go out and meet more people and look for investors and stuff for Agora 2.0, it's like, all right, well, how much time am I actually spending looking for other people? Am I going to other events? Am I putting myself out there? Am I having conversations with new people? And am I asking to be introduced to other people? Like those are all different questions that you could be asking and then just kind of auditing on yourself. Like how many conversations did I have with somebody who could connect me with somebody else that could be interested with this? Like, I don't know what it might be, but
that makes a lot of sense. I think the audit part's, it's almost like for me, I can only speak for myself. It's almost like I'm doing, but then I'm not auditing, right?
Yeah.
I'm not going back and be like, all right. And actually it's funny. My wife the other day is like, maybe you should like time. And I've done the, what's the work method? It's like 25 minutes on, 5 minutes
Pomodoro.
off. Pomodoro method. Yes. Thank you. 25 minutes on, 5 minutes off, or 10, whatever it is. And it's super effective. Like it really, like I've done that at full-time job and it's like, wow, you really get dialed in. You give yourself that little bit of respite, that little bit of break, and then you go back into it. And we were actually talking the other night, my wife was like, maybe you should like time chunk your day a little bit. Because even for the podcast, it used to be like, I record whatever. Now I'm like, all right, Tuesdays and Thursdays, it's this window or it's this window. Like those are the times I record a podcast. I'll make some exceptions here and there, but for the most part, like I have to be regimented with that. Like the other days are Agora days, and this is what I'm doing on those days. So I've gotten better, but I'm not color coordinated yet.
Yeah, and like that's might not even be something that you need to get into it, but it's like being aware of what the needs are for that season and then like planning to how do you adjust that? How do you solve that problem? So like when I was still doing all those training sessions and then I was hopping on for like podcast and then hopping on for like speaking things and like prepping for an organization or something like that, I was role switching so much that I started seeing like, hey, I'm just starting to spin a lot. I'm like doing a lot of things. There's a lot of movement, but there's no momentum. I'm not moving forward. I'm not getting better at any of these things. So then that's when I started saying like, okay, maybe Thursday should just be my podcasting day because then I don't need to switch into personal trainer mode. I don't have to switch into boyfriend mode. I don't have to switch into like sales position kind of thing. And that's just something that I learned because of paying attention to what I needed to do and what was slowing me down. And it's hard to identify those things if you don't have a system or a process to help you go through like, okay, let me check this, let me check that, let me check this, let me check that. What are some things that I can do for that? And that's exactly what the prime performance process is. It's a mental checklist for me of understanding like, okay, how do I move forward? Like I've been in the same spot for a while and I feel like I'm spinning these wheels without traction. What do I need to do? Boom, 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 boom through my head.
I love that. And it's important to actually use it yourself, right? Because you can come up with the best system in the planet, but if it's not something that you actually implement in your own life, again, there's that internal, understanding of this, right? What people actually need. The last part is do great things. Very grand statement, I must say.
Yeah.
Right? To go out and do great things, and everybody's great is different, right? So what is that? What does that embody?
Yeah, so kind of like we were talking about earlier, like when you get into entrepreneurship, you're set out, you got a lot of goals, or most people have a lot of goals, and they're excited to do some really awesome things. But then most of the time they have a second job, or they're building this or doing something. And doing it alone as a solopreneur is great, and you can get so far and you can do some good things. But like we said, if you want to do some genuinely great things, you want to make lasting impact and like change lives and communities and create bigger things, you can't do it alone. So the first part of that doing great things is the prime principle of influence. You got to be able to influence yourself, and you do that by making sure that you have a strong support system around you. You got to have a good coach, you got to have captains that you can rely on, and you got to have a solid crowd of supporters. When you can identify those players, then you have a strong support team. And then that's how you're going to influence yourself. How do you influence others? I talk about sharpening your social skills. So I'm a big acronym guy. So skills is like SKILLS. Survey your network, know what their goals are, initiate conversation, listen intentionally, leverage your resources, and then strengthen that connection. Boom, you just do that, you start to develop more influence, and you get that influence by building trust. And you build trust by giving trust. So you're giving it out there and asking and giving more help and trying the best that you can to be more valuable. So that's where I'm at currently is like, okay, how do I build more influence? How do I connect with more people? How do I know, what do I know that what they're working on? How do I be a value asset to them? And then once you start to build more influence, you can start to make things happen. And then that's where the final one of prime principle of opportunity, creating a shared success. So not only success for yourself, like you don't want to just have a shitty product where you're just like basically scamming people, right. But you want to have a success for yourself. Your customers and your clients need to have success. They need to achieve an outcome and a result, but then also the people in between. So like connecting and growing and working together. And I think of like, friendship with like Brandon Godoris. So now he's got a great location where he's also bringing people in, providing a space for people to also do events, kind of like yourself here. You've got Agora, you bring people in. We've done speaker night here before. Like you're creating a success. You are helping Brandon bring people in, so then he has a success, but then also customers of Brandon's like myself coming for the speaker night is also a success. So that's a shared success where everybody's a win, 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 win. And then being able to do that and reflecting on the other principles creates this sustainable momentum that moves you forward and starting to keep that traction tight and keep moving that needle forward.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Yeah, it's really about feeding not only yourself, but really feeding others through yourself, right? And then there's a return on that that's energetically different than anything else, right? That ROI on like true connection and giving is more valuable than your bank account at times, right? Yes, you need the 3D currency, but when the currency becomes like giving, right? It's a feedback loop that's really hard to put something on, but there's something there.
Yeah, and the opportunity portion can be really fun, but it's hard to get there without doing a lot of the other work. And then I talk about like becoming that like overnight sensation, because once you do all the other principles and you lean into the opportunity, that's where you start to generate luck. And then you look like that lucky guy who's like, oh, he got a lucky break because he got connected with somebody and something else. But behind the scenes, they don't know that every day you're leveraging your uniqueness. You literally understand your audience, and you know how to connect and collaborate, and then you know how to keep showing up and staying consistent. Yeah. And that's what creates that luck.
In the entrepreneurial, self-help, personal development, whatever you want to label it, space, you do hear the future self, your future version, vision, visualization and manifestation and all of these things. Yes, right? But I call it living in the delta, right? It's who you are, who you see yourself being, and then there's a massive gap in between that, right? And that gap can only get filled, or you can only achieve that future version of yourself by small incremental things. Every day, small grunt work, small things. But we expect these like quantum leaps, and you do hear about like these bigger shifts that happen, right? And that comes from the luck aspect of things, right? The whole idea of like when opportunity meets preparation, right? They call it luck or whatever it is. So it's a very interesting idea that we always have this, especially in personal development, like the future version of yourself. And that can change over time, right? But then there's this reverse engineering to where you are now, and then this forward movement that you have to take based off the reverse engineering.
Yeah.
So it's a mind fuck.
Yeah, and yeah, that's why it's so difficult, right? And like that, like everything we've been talking about is a lot of crap to be talking about and thinking about. And when you're in that position as like this expert, or you're like the owner operator, like you spent your whole life getting really good at whatever it is, like repairing cars, maybe it's painting, or maybe it's like baking cookies or whatever. You're good at doing that. Like, when the hell are you supposed to spend time doing all this other stuff that we've been talking about this entire episode? Like, where do you fit that in? And you can't if you're stuck grinding, and all you know is like, oh, I just got to push forward. You got to be able to give that room for growth, right?
Yeah. You got to breathe. You talk about the shadow success, and I love that terminology, right? Because you have, obviously, in the psychology world, you have like shadow self, you have Carl Jung with the shadow, and you hear about all this like lingering back end stuff, which is important to have because that is still a part of you, right? Like developing that relationship with the shadow is really important to do. And you talk about these ideas of these we'll call them 3D reality, right? Goals or accomplishment, whether it be a car or a watch or whatever it is, like these 3D expressions of success, right? That are validating, but they're not really intrinsically rewarding.
Yeah. Yeah, because I just go right back to when I was scaling up my like strength and conditioning book of business. I had like 15, 16, sometimes 17-hour days where I'm just back to back with like training session. And I did that for 7 days a week for about 3 years straight, like holidays, birthday parties, like didn't take a single day off. And obviously that comes with a trade-off. And that trade-off being your health, your relationships, your emotional well-being. And so girls that I would try to date just stop answering, coming back, and then friends would never call me to do things and stop seeing my family. And as I've shared with you before, my dad got sick with pancreatic cancer, and I regret not spending the time that he was around with him, and I was just kept working. And I did that because I was constantly still going back for like that attention and that external validation of like, okay, you are doing well, blah, 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 blah. And I use that as a badge of honor with working because I was making a lot of money. And to me, that was like, okay, if I'm busy, people can't work with me. And then it's almost like a higher version of attention. So like if somebody's trying to get to me, but they can't because I'm so busy. And then I was making money and bringing this, and I thought it was giving me this like value and praise and attention from people. But what I was really doing was just isolating myself from the people that really mattered most to me. That was that shadow success. Like I thought that's what I was doing. And every time I'd reach after, like, okay, oh, I made $100,000 this year. Okay, moving up to 150,000. All right, we're going to try to go for 200,000. And every time I'm reaching at it, looking for happiness, it just moves a little bit forward, kind of like your shadow. So every time you lunge for it, and every time you lunge, you lose a little bit of yourself. And after you lunge enough, you're left with very little bit about who you still are. And luckily, I came to that realization that like, hey, this isn't who I am. This isn't what I want to be building and growing. This is pretty close because I really am passionate about human performance and personal development and coaching too. But this isn't it here. And that was the beginning of the journey for me to figure out what is this prime performance coaching that I want to bring to the world. But I spent all those years just kind of lunging after that shadow success, losing the ones I loved. And if you, like a lot of people are stuck on that cycle where they just keep reaching for that without really understanding. And you can't get to that, right, without doing that self-reflection and awareness, because it's almost like this goal or this definition of success is just being bestowed upon you. I thought it was just like, oh, financial. And only thanks to like working with my mentor, Brett Bartholomew over at Art of Coaching, that I start to realize like, okay, there are other motives and drives, like psychological ones that are like written inside of ourselves. That's not just achievement. So it's not just financial. And I've started to realize like, okay, yeah, maybe I am a little bit more of a unity drive and community and service, also connecting with more people. Maybe that is starting to prioritize over the achievement drive and over the adversity drive. Because in which that's okay too, because we kind of shift. We're not just one pure drive at the end of the day. It's going to kind of ebb and flow depending on the different seasons and such. But those younger versions of myself, those were leaning heavy into those. That's what fueled a lot of that grind and hustle. But that wasn't really the deeper understanding of myself. Sorry if that was too long-winded.
Not at all. I think it's spot on. But again, it's a cultural recognition of what success is, right? The culture tells you what success is, and especially if you're in Westchester County, right? That will definitely let you know if you're doing well or if you're not doing well, and then what's that real definition? And there's something to having things, right, being 3D validation to your endeavors, right? Having a nice money's a tool, and I'd much rather have more of it than less, like period, right? Mm-hmm. But if it's your only motivator, if it's the only thing that's pushing you forward to become whatever, then something else is going to be dismissed and you're going to miss something. It is a tool, right? And it's probably the second most important tool to time, right? Which is freedom. And I think that's something that I think most entrepreneurs, most people want that. Most people want that freedom and flexibility to their lives, to their schedule. I always would say, like, I squeeze living into life, and I don't want to do that. Like, I want to live my life. And those are two very different journeys to take, because one is just entrenched in something, and then the other is open to everything, right? And both those worlds are important, and it's a balance. But when one takes precedence over the other, that's when all of a sudden things get distorted.
Yeah, but I think it's so hard for people to kind of, well, you don't know what you don't know, right? So when you look at money as like the ultimate thing to be chasing after, you don't know that there are other things that you should be kind of following or chasing or seeking at least. And unless you have money, the only way to get money is to do what everybody or culture has told you. Go to school, get good grades, get a job, work 5 days a week, and then you're rewarded with 2 days off in the weekend. Right. And then they spend their lives in this job that they don't like just so they can have that 2 days of freedom for themselves. Whereas, like, there are plenty of other ways of making money. And I'm not advocating that people don't go to college and don't pursue certain careers and such, because I am saying go do that because that's where you learn and you understand. But think for yourself a little bit more, and then understanding yourself helps you make better decisions again. And then that's where you can kind of pick and choose. Like the other day, I feel bad kind of sharing this, but it was Sunday night and I got super amped up like a couple weeks back, and I was amped and I was like talking to Victoria. I was like, yeah, oh my gosh, I'm just so ready. And she's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, tomorrow's Monday. I just can't wait. I got a lot of things planned for this week. She's like, I think you're the only one who's excited for Monday.
No, I get
and I
it.
was like, yeah, because I love what I do. I love connecting with people. I get to do this stuff. And like some people unfortunately don't. And I think it's because they're bought into that like cultural, like I have to do this for money instead of I should do what I want to. And then hopefully that brings some money through other avenues.
And it seems like it does. It seems like, you know, the when you break out of the matrix, when you break out of that construct of do this job, no matter how miserable you are, you'll get money, that's life. When you break outside of that, there does seem to be this underlying thing that, and you mentioned it earlier in the conversation of like just showing up, right? It does seem like there is it, like it's almost written, right? It almost is. It may take longer. It may be uncomfortable. It may suck for a long time, but there's seemingly something written that if you just don't give up, you keep on going, you show up for yourself and for the people around you, the return on that, and yes, in the 3D financial world, is so much greater than whatever capacity being miserable at a job is. And maybe that's me convincing myself of that, but from everything I've read, listened to, there's really such an abundance that's out there, that's outside of yourself, that you have to step outside of that matrix construct in order to even take that on.
Yeah. And also, I'm not saying like you have to do that, like, because I got a buddy.
It's not for everybody.
Yeah, I got a buddy who's got 4 kids under 4, and like definitely doesn't love what he does, but he just tolerates it because it pays the bills, and that allows him to make a life better for his kids, and he knows that that's the sacrifice that he's making,
Sure.
and he's okay with it. But think about the people who don't do that, and they just go to work because that's what they're told, and then they like come home and all they do is sit on their phone while they're watching Netflix at the same time, just to turn their brain off, so then tomorrow they can just go and brain dead to their job. Like, what kind of life is that?
Yeah, it's not living.
No.
You kind of you feel bad for those people. Honestly, when you kind of break outside of that construct and you look in from the outside looking in, you're like, oh man. But then there is something to it that it's probably very. It's like it might be less stressful. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess ignorance is bliss. In some situations.
Yeah, I had a college professor that said no one would ever trade their lives with a pig, and I was like, I think I would. Like I look at my cat and I'm like, man, my next life. I'm coming back as you midnight. Like,
yeah, I know some dogs that are like their pet owners or just treat them better than they treat people, and it's crazy. Some animal lives are pretty good.
Yeah. After this conversation, I think I need to hire you as my coach. So we'll have a conversation off air about that. Thanks for doing this. So much insight, so many takeaways. I'm definitely gonna listen back to this with like a notebook and be like, all right, I gotta implement some of these things, because especially on the like. Again, it's that busy versus productive, right? And you talked about it's harder for you to get access to me, whatever that means. If I'm answering more emails, right? I'm being productive, but there's a real difference there, and it's important to recognize that difference. So this is one that definitely you take out your notebook pad and your notebook for, and you take notes, and there's so many takeaways. So thanks for doing this. Number one. Number two, we have to have a conversation after this about coaching. And number three, where can people connect with you if they want to find out more about what you're doing, check out the podcast, all that good stuff? Yeah.
The easiest place to get in touch with me or check out like what's going on, what I've got coming up, and where I'm going to be is like social media. So Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, easiest place to find me just by searching my name, Rob Tracz. But also the podcast itself. So Surviving the Side Hustle, check that out at survivingthesidehustle.com. And I encourage anybody who's like found anything interesting or disliked anything to just reach out to me. Love to have a conversation about it, and just to kind of chat too. And if anybody is interested in what Prime Performance Coaches is doing and what we're kind of growing into, free strategy sessions for anybody who's listening. You can book one of those totally free of charge. Just survivingthesidehustle.com/free call.
Excellent. Dude, thank you very much. I think we have to change to thriving in the side hustle.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, man. I appreciate it.
Of course, dude. Thank you.
Thanks, brother.